And a good football Friday morning, Birds fans. May the next 500 begin. You got Mac and Mac here on your Birds 365 Football Friday. Johnny Mac, no shopping in the bargaining bin for the Eagles over the last couple of days. So we are left less than 3 weeks away to talk about the draft. Which, by the time we get to the draft, it'll be so nice that the Eagles actually do something and make a move and pick a player. And that way we can break it down rather than speculate. But we are in the speculating mode now. We're in the misinformation mode while we're at it. Teams floating certain desires and likes and scatter reports and everything to try and lead someone astray. And you have to try and figure out who's giving you the real deal and who's making it up, which is a yearly process that I always get a kick out. I just think it's great when people are putting out. And then to go back after the fact and look, wait, didn't they say they love this guy? He's sitting on the board and they passed on him? Yeah, that's called misinformation. I love that stuff.
Some of it's good. Some of it's bad though. You go to Laramie Tunsil. Remember that was shaky. Some people go to 2-bar lengths to try to, get people to skip on players or things of that nature. I think it's getting better.
Think an NFL team put out the Tunsil video?
No, but I think there's in fact, that was, a relative, as I remember, but, I think people are pushed in certain directions. I think it's like, you say that term disinformation, misinformation. In that world, the term is useful idiot. You use other people to get what you want accomplished is how I will say it.
They probably think of themselves as just being smarter and taking advantage of. Useful idiot is another way to describe it. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Here's where I am going to take the start of today's show. And I'm going to tell you ahead of time, it's a completely unfair question I'm going to ask you, but you're a big guy and you're smart. You are no useful idiot. So I'm going to ask you to do some helpful speculating with me today. When we started Birds 365 low 2 years ago, we had just gotten on the air, beginning our first 500 shows as we embark on the second grouping of 500 shows. It was leading up to the NFL draft in 2021. And the Eagles had the 6th pick in the draft, and they decided to trade out from 6 back to 12 to give themselves more draft capital. And then during the draft, they decided to move back up. So Howie moved back, then he moved back up from 6 to 12, and then from 12 to 10, and they did something that most people wouldn't believe could have happened. They made a trade with the Dallas Cowboys, who gave them what they wanted, the ability to move up 2 slots and get Devonta Smith. And I remember you and I talking about it afterwards, and you were pretty adamant about the Eagles had a group that they were looking at number 10. And that they thought that...
Well, they were looking at 12 real quick. They thought one of the 5 would fall to 12.
Okay, so not before they moved... Right, at 12, before they moved back up to 10. Sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah. And that was, that's why they felt comfortable moving down from 6, thinking, you're talking 6 spots. They thought one of those guys would sort of trickle through. And when it became, Devontae was the last one left. And when it became clear that that's where the move with the Cowboys, because the Eagles were pretty convinced the Giants were going to take Devontae at 11. So they had to go back up to 10. And Cowboys didn't care because they wanted Micah Parsons. And they knew the Eagles, they didn't know. But generally, when you make those trades, you say offense, defense, what are you taking? And, you're not going to burn bridges. So you tell the truth when that happens. And from the Cowboys' perspective, they're okay with it. They know where the Giants were going. And they were like, Micah Parsons is going to be there. So that's one of those rare trades that worked out for both teams. So the 5 players, and remember, so Trevor Lawrence, they knew they couldn't get, obviously. So he's off the board. Zach Wilson, they liked, but they knew they couldn't get. You know, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. They knew they couldn't get him. They knew they couldn't get Jamar Chase. So those three are off the table. Not like they didn't like those players. Obviously, everybody loved Lawrence and Chase. Zach Wilson now, a lot of people love Zach Wilson. A lot of people pretend to not like Zach Wilson now because of how things have shaken out. But it was pretty evident they weren't going to be able to get them. So the five players was Kyle Pitts, and that was probably unrealistic. Jalen Waddle, they loved, and the two cornerbacks, J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain. And I think those were the two players they thought they were going to get. They thought they would get one of those two. And Horn ended up going 8th. Surtain went 9th. And I think Horn, if you want to boil it down, is the guy they thought they would get at 12. And that sort of went away. And Devontae was the last of that group. And they felt there was a big drop-off from him to the next group, the next tier, shall we say. And so they made to move up, and it worked out. But that's sort of, why you make these types of trades. And remember, they got significant compensation from dropping 6 to 12. But they did love Jalen Waddle. If it came down to Jalen Waddle versus Devontae Smith, they won't admit it now, but they would have taken Jalen Waddle.
And Waddle went with that pick at number 6. The Dolphins thought that highly of Waddle that they took him at number 6. So the Eagles had no chance to get Waddle. They may or may not have known what Miami was going to do, but they might not have cared. If they had a large enough group of players to select from, they thought one would definitely get down to number 12. They needed to get aggressive and move back up 2 slots to get one of the guys they wanted. So, and oh, by the way, the Cowboys trading back and thought they were going to get Michael Parsons. They didn't really know because the Giants were between the Eagles. They might have known the Eagles would go in wide receiver and that there was no chance of Michael Parsons coming off the board. The Giants, if memory,
it's always a calculated gamble because remember, Chicago went up.
They traded out. The Giants traded out of that to select Justin Fields. So it worked out. Yeah. Talk about win-win for the Eagles and the Cowboys. It was also a win for the Bears by moving into number 11 because the Giants might not have traded that pick if Devontae Smith was still sitting on the board. So that's the fun we have with the NFL draft, the speculation both before and then what actually happens and then the analysis afterwards. And some teams look good and some teams don't look as good. We are in the before stage now, almost 3 weeks out, more than 3 weeks out. So here's the question I have for you today, Johnny Mac. And it's, as I say, an unfair question because Eagles might not even have that group. I'm sure they have their draft board and they're having conversations about it. Have they solidified the group of players that they want one of? And Howie is such an active general manager with trading up and trading back. You know that they're in the midst of this process right now. Where they're at, I don't know. You don't know, but I'm going to ask you to speculate. If we're looking at a group again, and you told us it was 5 deep when they were down at number 12, so they wanted to give themselves a little wiggle room. If you want to go 5 deep, feel free. I won't ask you to go that far because it is, as of now, a little closer up. They are in the 10th spot as of right now. When they traded back a couple of years ago, they went all the way back to 12. So you might need a larger group. What kind of a group are we looking at here? How big a group? Do you think it runs 4 deep that the Eagles say, all right, we need one of these guys? If you, as you pointed out, take a couple of guys off the board to begin with, like they did a couple of years ago with the 2 quarterbacks and Jamar Chase, who you knew no way was getting down to number 6, let alone number 12, where they traded down to. You want to take a couple of the quarterbacks off the board, Will Anderson off the board, and say, yeah, there's no chance they're getting down. How big is that group that the Eagles are looking at? And give me a couple of names that you think that are on it right now that they're looking at number 12.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as big this time simply because, I've talked to a bunch of scouts, some on the show, some off the show, and they all been pretty consistent saying there's, 6 to 8 real blue chip players, and most of them aren't the quarterbacks. Now, Blake, when we had Blake Bedingfield on, he had Bryce Young in that group. Some do, some don't. It's usually Bryce if they have a quarterback in that group, just the top pure football players. So if you do the math and 4 quarterbacks come off the table in the top 9, and you're sitting at 10, well, then you're going to get one of those 6 to 8 players. So I'm guessing the tier for the Eagles is probably going to be 2 to 3 because there's a significant before there's a significant drop off. And the no-brainer, again, except for the off the field stuff, is Jalen Carter.
Right.
Like if Jalen Carter's there, they're taking him. If Jalen Carter's there, I should say, and they have made the decision that all the issues aren't a problem and they don't red flag him, they're taking him. I mean, this is one of the easiest decisions I've ever had in the drafts. If they clear him, if they don't red flag him, and he by some strange stretch lasts to 10, they're taking him. It's at a position they value. It's at a position they happen to need this year because they lost Javon Hargrave. You could plug them right in, and look, there's always startup costs, I always say, with rookies, but he's much more talented. I mean, he's got a chance to be, and Javon's a really good player, but he's got a chance to be a really, really, really good player if he does all the things he needs to do. So to me, he's sort of set aside. And then you start thinking about, like, Will Anderson's a guy. I mean, that to me, I don't want to put him in the Jamar Chase category as a prospect, but he's a guy they're not going to get.
So, I do. I think he's every bit the prospect that Chase was. Because remember, Chase went 5.
Yeah.
Even if the 4 quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, I think Anderson's going to be no worse than 5th. And I think somebody in the
well, I don't mean, I mean, still edge rushers, receivers are more valuable probably than they've ever been, but they're never going to get to the level of edge rushers. So, but part of that comes into it. Like if you go back to the Chase year, the fact that, and Kyle Pitts is a good player, but what the heck is Kyle Pitts, going in front of Jamar Chase for? That's, there's always bad decisions. I just mean as a pure, and Bijan Robinson, I should also put in that, just as a pure football player, Bijan Robinson's top 5 by everybody in this draft, by everybody. But, the position is the position, and the value doesn't match what he is. It's not as drastic as wide receiver, but edge rushers are always going to get a little bit of deference compared to receivers. I would say it goes quarterback 1 and then edge rusher 2 when it comes to value of the NFL. And the old adage is you either get the quarterback or you get to the quarterback.
Right.
That's what everyone believes. So that's what I meant. I just mean as like Jamar Chase is just, I mean, that's at his position. Like everybody talks about Jefferson. He's got more talent than Jefferson. He's one of the best wide receiver prospects I've ever seen. And Jefferson's great. I'm not down. Jefferson's phenomenal, but Jamar Chase he's got a higher ceiling. I'll say that. And he's, you could already make the argument he's better. They might be 1-2 in the entire NFL. And you could make an argument for Jamar. I mean, I would lean towards Jefferson because of the product, because he's done it.
Right.
Well, you can make an argument for Chase. That's how good he is all I'm trying to say.
Right. The 1 and 1A. You don't really have to choose between them. And if I had to, I would take Jefferson, but it's not like that's a slight to Jamar Chase. He's absolutely phenomenal.
No. And I don't want to slight Jefferson's unbelievable player, but I'm just trying to reflect how good Jamar Chase is. So when I look at the Eagles, I look at, if I'm looking at a tier at 10, I would say it's going to be edge rusher. It's going to be offensive line. And I'm not putting Bijan in the category because of the position. So Jalen Carter, I set aside. He's by far number one. If by some reason they don't red flag him and he falls, he's by far number one. That's the easiest decision they've ever made. And then it comes down to the group of Skoronski's the only one I would say is definitely in it. I would put Paris Johnson in it as well, although I don't think he's going to be there. And then the edge rushers, it's kind of like what flavor do they want? We talked about that yesterday. Lucas Van Ness I think he's going to go higher than people realize. I mean, everybody looks at him in college. He didn't start games. That's one of those guys that NFL scouts like more than the general public. And I think the Eagles are in that category. We talked about Nolan Smith. You want that redundancy. The kid from Texas Tech, I don't think he's going to be there. But it's going to be that grouping, the offensive line, edge rushers. And the outlier would be Kalijah Kancey. I don't know what the Eagles feel about him because he's so undersized. But if they like him, he's another guy that go much higher than people realize.
And not all that shockingly, John McMullen says the Eagles are going on the line. When in doubt, get back to the trenches. Offensive line, defensive line. No cornerbacks, no safeties, no linebackers, no wide receivers. Well, we understand that. They got two good wide receivers. You're not taking a wide receiver 3 with the 10th pick in the draft. Certainly no running backs, no quarterbacks, no tight end. Yeah, when in doubt, Howie goes into the trenches.
And by the way, I would throw cornerback in there. I just don't think the cornerbacks are they're going to value them. And basically, you're talking about Gonzalez and Witherspoon. I just don't think they're going to value. And this is the Eagles. I think this is what I think the Eagles think. I don't think they're going to value those guys as high as the offensive defensive line.
Would have been very interesting if one of the two cornerbacks was not still with the Eagles. And I mean, Darius Slay.
Yeah.
James Bradbury, the fact that they retain both of them, the Eagles will tell you, we don't even look at that. We draft the best possible player. To a point. I think everybody says that, and I think they mean it to a point.
Yeah, you're right.
When you get on the clock and you actually have this gaping hole, this opening in your starting lineup, and you got the 10th pick in the draft, and there's a player at a position that you feel confident can step right in and start for you, but always number 13 on your board and you're drafting number 10. Yeah, you get tempted to.
It would have changed. Yeah, it definitely would have changed. But here's how I'll describe it, because we're talking about 2021. They don't think Gonzalez and Witherspoon are Horn and Surtain. I'll put it that way. They thought those guys were, a step above.
We shall see. I like Gonzalez a lot. That was a guy I thought he was going to take until they got both of their corners locked up. All right, what we have locked up is one of our favorite guests, John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation, waiting in the green room. When I reached out to John Chief and come on, I told him we had fun with his list last week of the unquestionable, undeniable, undebatable top quarterbacks in the NFC.
One of the greatest arguments in the first 500 shows of Birds 365. Probably didn't even know it.
We'll let John Stolnis explain why he laid out the group the way he laid. And the funny thing is, we're both going to debate with John about completely different stances, but we both have a question with John's list, which we'll have some fun with when we get him up, and also talk Birds and Draft with John Stolnis from Bleeding Green Nation next here on Birds 365.